session in English because we have a foreign invitee in our panel, so I think it's a good manner to speak a language that he understands, unless we know how to speak Greek, which I don't. I speak many languages, but not Greek. So good morning, everyone. Good morning to those of you also online following us on this plenary, the first of today. And this plenary is about governance. Governance is a strange word that many of us don't know what it means. If you Google it up, governance is the way rules, norms, and actions are structured, sustained, regulated, and held accountable by an organization, a region, a country, or similar. I know this definition because I had to look for it maybe 3 years ago when I was doing something similar in another life. And therefore, governance establishes a sort of a framework that helps us all involved and all organizations involved to act in the best interest of the object being governed. Here we are going to talk about ocean governance and all the science that is connected to this decision-making within ocean governance. Also, ocean governance is in line with the Portuguese National Ocean Strategy, strategic goal number 10, and it's a very relevant topic for Portuguese people, for Portuguese science, as we are, as we all know, I believe by now, a large maritime and Atlantic nation. But it's also very relevant for the European Union, as its enormous maritime space is crucial for international connection, but also diplomacy, science cooperation, and represents indeed, because of that, a great opportunity for science and innovation development. So to kick off our panel, we will have, and for you to know how things will proceed, we will have 3 interventions by 3 speakers. One of them is online. Then we will have a moment for questions and answers. If my speakers comply with their time, I will open also the floor for questions from the audience if you want to intervene. And then we will close the session with a very special guest, Professor Alexandre Quintanilha, whom I will speak a bit later on. Okay? So to kick off our panel, I will have the pleasure to introduce to you Professor Luís Menezes Pinheiro. I guess some of you know him from this house. He's a PhD in marine geophysics from Imperial College of London. He's also the chairman of the Portuguese Committee of the IOC of UNESCO and the national delegate of the IOC Executive Council. He's the coordinator of the National Committee of the UN Ocean Decade. He's also, as I mentioned, an associate professor of marine geology and geophysics in this university, and a colleague and friend, an emeritus member of the Portuguese Marine Academy for many years. So it's an honor to have your words, even if they are online. Luís, welcome to this session. You have your 12 minutes, and the time is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Perfectly, yeah.
I'll just show... Are you seeing my slides as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So first of all, sorry not to be present there, but I have to be in Galway during these days. I was in Dublin and then in Galway. So what I want to talk to you is about the decade of ocean science. So the main thing that, as an introduction, I think the key thing that we need to have in our mind is that we are now speaking not of oceans. We speak of ocean basins, but we speak of one ocean. So this is something in which, of course, Magellan has had a wonderful role in showing us that all the oceans are connected. And so now this idea that everything is connected in the ocean is crucial. And this is the vision that we have now. And so the pattern of currents and interfaces between ocean and atmosphere and lithosphere and hydrosphere, they are critical. And just to give you just a brief example, the ocean has this important role in terms of putting together, let me just lower this a bit, but so the ocean has this important role in distributing temperature, salinity all over the Earth's surface, and so it has an important role in climate regulation. And of course, when this role is becoming threatened, of course, we are getting climate change issues. We now know that we are acidifying the ocean, we are increasing the oxygenation, and so that's why We need also we've been receiving quite a lot of warnings now concerning major earthquakes, major tsunamis. These are not related to climate change, of course, but now we have the capacity to monitor these things, and the main thing is that we use the science to protect society. So we've also realized that it is absolutely key, if we want to have human health, to have healthy oceans. And the fact is that we've been treating the ocean very badly. We normally think that when we throw things away, they will disappear. The ocean is huge, and so nothing is going to happen. But now we see that the fish that we are eating, it's becoming with plastics. And so we also know that besides plastics pollution, we have many other forms of pollution, including pharmaceuticals, chemicals, fertilizers, and so on. And so we need to take action. And now the key thing and the key challenge is how can we bring together, how can we make compatible sustainability of the ocean, the health of the ocean, with sustainable development and economical development. Of course, we have to combat things like overfishing and overexploitation of resources, and we have to protect these habitats. So this is why when the first World Ocean Assessment was published, the IOC decided to create the Ocean Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And so we are a group of 150 countries. We are located at the UNESCO headquarters in Paris, and we have functional autonomy within the UNESCO system. So we are responsible for the large programs in international cooperation, in research, observation of the ocean floor. And we run the GOOS, so the Global Observation System. We also run IODE, in which we share data and we promote standards for oceanographic data sharing. And we run the OBIS network, in which we have the information system concerning biogeographic information. And also we are, together with IHO, we are running GEPCO, which is the Global Chart of the Oceans. Also, we have a strong role in terms of ocean literacy and capacity development for countries. So in 2017, we launched the first steps concerning the preparation of the UN Decade, and this was launched officially in 2021. So the key societal outcomes that we want is a safe ocean in which human communities are protected from ocean hazards and operations at sea are safe, a sustainable and productive ocean in which we can continue to provide food, but at the same time keep the ecosystem services functioning. We also want it transparent and accessible, so we want to have all the information concerning the ocean being shared between the different researchers, between the different countries. We want to look at the sources of pollution, identify them and clean them. We want the ocean to be resilient, and also the coastal populations, particularly facing the new challenges of global change, and we want to predict it. So for this we need global observation. So there are also we have 10 major challenges, which I suggest you to look at the webpage of the decade, where you have everything, but basically, as you see, it's essentially what I've mentioned before. All this is included in the societal outcomes. So the societal outcomes are the response to these challenges. So this is a unique opportunity that we have for nations to work together and for us to revert the state of degradation of the ocean. One of the key things that we are trying to do, and one of the key commitments, you know that we only have a good mapping of the ocean floor. When we started, we had about 9 to 10%. Now, since the decade started, we have now about 24%. So we've gone a long way, and this was also because we've involved the private sector, and so we've been working together, not only the public services, but the public sector. And what we want to do is, this is the type of resolution that we have on land. Offshore, this is where we want to go. And for this, we are doing several programs all over the world. I will also mention the programs that we have in Portugal. And the other important thing is that if we want to predict the ocean, we need a global observation system. And many times doing this is not so easy because we have some of the parameters that are being measured, they can be sensitive to some countries, and that's why institutions like the IOC and the UN are important, because for instance, when we started to use biogeochemical sensors on the Argo floats, now we can measure all, like besides temperature, salinity, oxygen, we can measure now pH, nitrate, chlorophyll, backscatter, and the reagents, and we were able to arrange a system in which all the countries agreed on how to proceed when the boys go into areas of national jurisdiction. So, as you can see, this is, we have about 4,000 Argo floats, conventional floats, but we have one order of magnitude less of biogeochemical sensors. So this is one of the areas in which we are working. Also, acidification is critical. We need to have sustainable observations on these, and we need to predict. And so we've gone a long way now with this new observation network. And again, as concerns ocean pollution, not only the plastics, although the plastics are the ones that we speak more about, and they are really a large part of ocean pollution, but oil spills, chemicals, mercury, pesticides, pharmaceuticals, these are emerging ones that we need to tackle. But all the news are not bad, because in 2022 we were able to have a commitment of 175 nations to agree on promoting and developing an international legally binding instrument for marine plastics, which we hope will be ready in 2024. So the decade, essentially, how does it work? You have calls in which the countries submit actions, programs, and projects. And as you can see here, this is the first call that we had in 2020. We had 31 programs, 10 UN-led actions, 36 contributions, 84 projects. Every year we have new calls. I'm not going into detail, you can see them also. This is in 2021. They are normally thematic. So this one was in understanding and beating marine pollution, protecting and restores ecosystem, and also unlock solutions for climate change. We had other ones in 22. This one, sustainable blue food and sustainable economy. And so in each of them, you have large number of program submissions from a large number of countries and projects as well. So basically, we want to involve in the decade everyone, so not only the general public, the scientific system, the policy, donors and foundations, but the civil society and the private sector are essential. It works with decade coordination offices, decade collaborative centers, implementing partners, and national decade committees. Portugal has only created its National Decade Committee, although it has been proposed since, well, more than 3 years ago. But actually it was only launched, well, it was only approved in March of this year. And so in April, the Coordination Committee was nominated, and so we'll be presenting the launching of this in next September. What it has been suggested to member states is that they host a coordination office or a decade collaborative center. Portugal is aiming at having a collaborative center, promoting decade actions, responding to the calls. We've been doing quite well also on this, but I think we can do much better. Contribute to in-kind financial resources. Portugal has been doing that every year. Establishing a decade committee, so we've just established our national committee here. Become a member of Ocean Decade Alliance. Portugal is a member of the Ocean Decade Alliance, and our President of the Republic is one of the patrons. Host a regional international conference. We've done that, namely now with the UN Ocean Conference. And then we will have also decade activities that are being run. So how can you participate? Everyone can participate, from scientists, research institutes, indigenous people, early career ocean professionals. We have a large network of about 1,800. And also, of course, governments, philanthropic entities, aquariums, but every individual can participate. And it's very easy. So if you have an action, you can submit either an activity, a contribution, and even a program. which can be regional or local. And so this is the main thing. So this is key for Portugal because we have a huge area and we have a national strategy for the sea, which has been implemented and it's aligned with the decade objectives. And therefore, this is critical. Why? Because we are a country in which our area has not been yet properly mapped, but we have the CMAP 2030 program being run. So we hope to do this by 2030. This is absolutely critical. We are in an area of high risk from the point of view of earthquakes and tsunamis, and we have large faults. And what we are doing now, we will be changing the submarine cable that is going from the continent to Azores and Madeira, and we will be instrumenting it. It will be a smart cable, and this will allow us much better precision in location of earthquakes and early warning systems. So this is basically it. We have also a large program on marine protected areas, and we've created already an Ocean Teacher Global Academy in which we are providing programs for capacity building for developing countries. We have more than 170 participants from 17 institutions, and we've recently created also this All-Atlantic Floating University network, which is being coordinated by Portugal and which includes now 24 countries, 36 programs, and we have already had a few cruises. So basically this is it. So please join the UN Ocean Decade. Just go to the webpage, register. Any questions you have, we always send from the National Committee for the IOC, we always send information on calls and everything to our list. If you're not on our list, please tell us. And thank you so much. And since we just started, I hope we will have the launching in September and you will all be invited. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luís, for this nice introduction on a worldwide overview with the UN IOC Ocean Decade. Now we will go to an island perspective with my dear colleague Mafalda Freitas. She's a marine biologist with an MSc in Business and Administration, and also, which is not common, an experienced diver with several research campaigns and submersible and ROV missions in the ocean. She's a good friend, and we started together a politician career more or less at the same time. In 2020, she's still there. I moved to funnier things. And she's currently acting as a regional director of the sea at Madeira. Mafalda, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So, good morning to you all. First of all, thank you Helena Vieira for the invite to be here. So, as Helena just said, I've been working in the past 24 years in the Natural History Museum of Funchal and in the Marine Biology Station of Funchal. And since March 2020, I'm the first regional director for the sea in the Madeira regional government. So you all know, but we have a guest. So Madeira Archipelago is situated in the North Atlantic Ocean in a region known as Micronesian. It's composed by two inhabited islands, Madeira and Porto Santo, and we have two natural reserves, Desertas Islands and Selvagens Islands. This one's the southern part of Portugal and also the biggest protected area in North Atlantic. We have a coastline of 400 kilometers and an exclusive economic zone of 440,000 square kilometers with a maximum depth of 5,000 meters. The autonomous region of Madeira is an outermost archipelago with a remarkable historical relation with the sea and unique natural conditions for the development of the blue economy. In fact, Madeira has a well-established tourism sector, a long tradition in fishery industry, a growing offshore aquaculture, and has the fourth European ship register, the International Shipping Register of Madeira. Actually, the blue economy contributes with more than 10% for the economy of the island, generating about 451 million euros per year. So the Madeira Regional Directorate for the Sea belongs to the Regional Secretary for the Sea and Fisheries and was created in March 2020 under the new structure of the regional government of Madeira. Our mission is to propose the regional policies for the area and for the sea and to coordinate the development of the Madeira Blue Economy Strategy. Among our competences are the Maritime Spatial Planning, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, the Research, Monitoring and Management of Resources, licensing of the sea activities, and the ocean literacy. So we are currently finishing the strategy for the blue economy, aligned with the national strategy for the sea. So this aims to strengthen the economy potential presented by the ocean and has two volumes. The diagnostic report that presents a global framework of the blue economy from the European scale to regional scale, with an analysis that reflects the current situation of each sector of the blue economy in Madeira. And this report was finished last year. The second volume, the action plan, consists of a set of action measures that for a 10-year horizon through the participation of various political and private actors, and the plan will also include a set of well-defined strategical goals. And we hope to complete this action plan by the end of this year. So regarding the Maritime Spatial Planning, Madeira has the plan approved by the Portuguese government since December 2019 that defines the uses and activities in our maritime space. Next year, we will present the geoportal with all the information approved in the plan, including the uses and the activities, making it possible to visualize the various layers of information. The plan dynamics includes allocation plans for each activity and also the attribution and cession of the permits for private use of the national maritime space that we call TUPEM in Portugal. And we already attribute permits for 2 submarine cables and 1 research authorization for underwater noise monitoring. But we not only do marine policy, we also do research. So we have 2 research facilities. In Funchal Harbor, we have our headquarters with laboratories for sample processing, image laboratories for otoliths and histology, and laboratories for quantification of contaminants. Also, we have another research facility that's the Madeira Aquaculture Center that was founded in 2000, aiming the technical and scientific support of the aquaculture industry in Madeira through the development and execution of research projects on new species, new diets, and new technologies. And also the development of pilot projects with new production systems and the integration of new species. And now we are doing aquaculture we try with limpets and with sea urchins. And for the research projects, we have research in different areas. Regarding fisheries and aquaculture research, I have to highlight the Portuguese data collection framework, a project that collects fisheries data. It's obliged for all member states and supports the common fisheries policy. Includes the collection of fisheries, biological, environmental, and socio-economic data from the fishing sector. Also, we have the project Mariscomac, the development of conditions and scientific basis for the sustainable exploration of shellfish and fish. And with this project, we try to add value to the traditional fishing, developing new fisheries, innovating, and add value to the fishery products. And we discover a new fishing resource, the prawns of Madeira, and we have been doing experiences and gastronomic events with local chefs. Also, we have projects in the area of the quality and safety of fish consumption. One of these projects, it's called Mimar Plus. So in Madeira, we have a ciguatoxin that it's called ciguatera. And so we forbid the capture of specimens of amberjacks weighing more than 10 kilos. So with this project, we want to consolidate a surveillance network of emerging marine biotoxins in the Micronesian archipelagos and try to determine which species accumulate these biotoxins. Other project in this area is the project RASPA, and in this project, we do the determination of the heavy metal contents, the cadmium, lead, and mercury in the commercial fish species. In the area of the marine litter, we have several projects. One is the project Deep MEL, whose main objective is to study the distribution of marine litter and its impact on the deep marine habitats up to 1,000 meters depth. And finally, and in the area of the maritime spatial planning, we have the MESOR project that try to fill the gaps that we have in this area. Finally, because the future of the ocean governance is the ocean literacy, we have the Blue School program. It's a program from the Ministry of Economy and Sea, and it's coordinated by us in Madeira. It's an education program whose mission is to promote ocean literacy in school community with a direct influence on the general population. The Blue School program also integrates several marine education actions, like putting the students on diving classes and nautical sports with a network of partners. We started in Madeira in 2020, and 3 years after, we have 51 schools involving more than 6,500 students. And one of the activities that we did was a drawing contest with the theme, The Impact of Marine Litter in the Marine Life. And the 10 best drawings were printed on over 1 million sugar packets in a synergy with the Delta Cafés. So I think that's all. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mafalda. Congratulations on the Blue School program results. I remember when it was starting, and you had a tremendous success, apparently. 51 schools is quite a big achievement. Finally, as our final speaker, I would like to call Spyros Kouvelis. He's a colleague of mine at the mission board of the Mission Ocean Restore Our Oceans and Waters. Spyros has over 30 years of experience in sustainable development and sustainable finance, maritime affairs, and he's also an experienced politician, or wasn't this the panel of governance, both as a member of the Greek Parliament, but also as Deputy Minister for Foreign Economic, Cultural and Environmental Affairs in Greece. Currently, he's the founder and director of the Institute for Sustainable Development of the European Public Law Organization, or EPLO for friends. The floor is yours, Spyros, and I know you will shine. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Elena, and thank you all for this invitation. It's really amazing to be here at this wonderful event in the very beautiful city of Aveiro. I didn't had the opportunity to visit before, and I'm really impressed by the university, but also the city in itself. And yes, I used to be a politician, but now I'm okay. And, it's a great honor to also be on the board with Elena and another, I think, 14 people that we have in this board, trying to make the policy of the European Union for the protection of the oceans something that will actually happen, so that we can reach out to people, engage people as much as we can, engage institutions, private sector, everyone, because there is a lot of need. And this is very much about governance. I will tell you a couple of things, but I wanted to start with a picture of an unusual sea. And this is actually a sea that you see here. This is called the Sea of Ice, in French, la mer de glace. It is a glacier that is just between France and Switzerland, just close to Chamonix. I took myself this picture in April 2022. And when I was there, I was so shocked to see that maybe you can see at the very middle of the picture, there is actually a person walking down the thing there, that small. And what you see as a cave at the very, very middle of the picture is actually a cave, and you cannot even see the size of people that are walking inside this cave. The tragic thing is that in 1990, the glacier was standing up to the point where you see this plate. And the depth from that point where the plate stands to where it goes now is 160 meters down. This is how much the glacier has gone down since 1990. To me, it was a shocking revelation of what climate change is about, and it confirmed very much also what Professor Eva Calv, if I pronounce right her name, was saying yesterday about the effects of climate change on the oceans. And I'll go to this next picture that shows another effect of climate change that is related very much to the seas and the oceans. This is a picture, if I remember right, from the UN, and it shows what is the current state of water stress around the Mediterranean and what are the two different expected scenarios by 2050, which are one a little bit better than the other, but still they're quite critical. And if you look at the water stress that we are expecting around this part of the world, and it will be the same to some extent for many parts of the world, what we see is that we have less and less available water resources around the coast, and that means that we will have, to look for alternative sources of food, because we will not be able to produce as much food as we used to do before with traditional agriculture and using water resources. But to this, we need to add a couple of other things that are related to climate change and the ocean. One is that more and more people are going towards the coast, again, because of the movement because of climate change. The UN has actually calculated that we expect by 2050 to have about 70% of the world population living in big cities close to the coast, which is a terrible number. I mean, 70%. How do you actually service that in terms of food, in terms of water, in terms of all things that you need? And again, the ocean will be one of those that will face this demand for all these resources. The second is that we have very important critical changes in the actual, if you like, ecology of the ocean, with new species being coming into place because of the change of temperatures, with very important changes in the ecosystems within the ocean and so on. And all this calls for more to be produced from the ocean. This is a picture that shows actually how the different sectors are participating in what we call the blue economy. The blue economy is a very, very big, very vast thing. And I will tell you a couple of numbers in a minute, but first of all, let me tell you some indicative things that you can see here in this sector. So we have ships, shipping, shipbuilding, transportation, we have offshore oil and gas, we have fisheries, we have biotechnology that produces both food and medicinal products and other things that we need to take from the species that grow in the sea. Renewable energy in the sense of marine renewable energy like wave, currents, and so on. Of course, coastal and maritime tourism, which we know very well in our region, aquaculture, mineral resources, and so on. But to just get an idea of how important these things are, look, this is a scheme that shows in 2010 what was the distribution of the ocean economy in different sectors. So you have the biggest one in offshore oil and gas. Then we have maritime and coastal tourism with 26%, maritime equipment with 26% as well, port activities at 13% of all this total 1.5 trillion that the overall magnitude of the global blue economy is. Then we have the smaller but very important sectors of industrial, fish processing, water transport, both of them at 4%, shipbuilding and repair at 4%, and then we have smaller numbers for industrial marine aquaculture, offshore wind, industrial capture fisheries at around 1%. This is about to change in two ways. One is that the global value added of the ocean economy is expected by 2030 to be at least double what it used to be. So in 2010, as we saw before, we had $1.5 trillion as a global size of this blue economy. By 2030, that is both an estimate of the UN and the European Commission, we expect this to grow to 3 trillion. In terms of size, that means that in 2010, we had an economy around all the blue sectors that was as big as Canada. In 2030, we'll have an economy as big as Germany. And this is a very heavy weight in the global economy, as you can imagine. And we expect, as it says on the right-hand side, that prior to COVID-19, the pandemic, we expected this increase to go up to 3 trillion and employ 40 million people. Now, after COVID, it is expected that maybe we'll go even beyond that size. And there will be more and more demand on what we do about the services, the products, everything that comes from the ocean. Now, this is a picture I promised to Mafalda I would show. And this is a picture from the Selvagens Islands in Madeira, Portugal. This is a study that we did. It was supported by Forum Oceano in Portugal, and it was a study to assess the socioeconomic perspective using an ESG, environmental, social, and governance approach for the Selvagens Islands. Because we found it very interesting that this is an area and a region in which you cannot have any human activity in terms of developing, full human activity, but still there are very important socioeconomic values. And to us, it was very interesting to find that, as you might expect, there is a lot of value in terms of the ecological value, of course, which is something that you can account also in terms of socioeconomic and financial values. You have a lot of value in terms of the reproduction of fish stocks, and what it means for the fisheries that take place outside the area, the no-take zone of the islands themselves. It means a lot in terms of economic value, again, for tourism, although you cannot have people walking on the island, but everything that can be developed around that. But very interestingly, the highest economic value that we calculated to have is the carbon sink value of the system. So if you can consider that this being a pristine ecosystem actually has a very important value in absorbing CO2 emissions, if you turn that into CO2 payments, CO2 absorption payments, this is by far the highest value that those islands offer. And so it was very interesting to see that in a system like this, you have to make sure that you have an appropriate governance. And this was like a microcosmos, let's say, of how governance works. Because what you need to do here is to make sure that A, the fishermen will respect the no-take zones. B, the fishermen, for example, again, will reap the benefits of respecting the no-take zones, and so they will be able to get economic benefit out of that. C, you have to make sure that the governance and the way that you manage this protected area as part of the Madeira Islands region, has been planned and is happening in the proper way, like Mafalda showed us with a maritime spatial planning process that they're following in the region of Madeira. And so all of these things are, if you like, micrographies of what governance means. And what governance means for the islands is this. You need to take into account a whole set of things that are very important on how you manage the ocean resources, how you manage the space in oceans. And let's start from the one at the top, the 12 o'clock, which is tenure and access. Who has tenure and who has access into a maritime area? If you go 50 years back, everyone would tell you that, the sea has no boundaries, the sea is like an open resource for everyone. Well, this is changing. Because of what I showed you before, there will be so much demand in the maritime resources that we need to find some ways to organize this. Otherwise, free access for all means that in a few years or decades' time, we will have destroyed everything without any kind of regulation. Food security. How do we make sure that the food resources that come from the sea are actually preserved and made to be held in a sustainable process for producing food out of that? Gender equity, very important. How do we make sure that both genders or all genders have actually equal access and rights to the resources? Small-scale fisheries. We have worked a lot with small-scale fishermen. They're usually the ones that are being displaced very quietly out of the process. And actually, that means that small communities living in the islands or on the coast lose their only livelihoods that they have. Environmental justice, obviously. Economic benefits that need to be spread around. I will not go through the whole list because it would take a lot of time, and I do not want to make Helena more anxious than she looks already. But all of these things are very, very important parts of what we mean by governance. And this has to be regulated, it has to be controlled, but very importantly, it has to be built with continuous involvement of all the stakeholders. It's not like the three of us, because we're geniuses here, will sit down and make a plan and say, this is what you have to do. You need to involve everybody when you're planning it, because this is the only way that it will be effective on one hand and respected on the other, because everyone will be able to see themselves as part of the whole process. And my final slide, and I want to stay on that for just a second, is this is a picture of the process that is taking place in the European Union for maritime spatial planning. This is a whole process that started decades ago, actually, when the directive for maritime spatial planning was passed through the European Parliament and then Commission. And you can see in dark blue the countries that already have adopted the maritime spatial planning plan. It was approved by their governments, their parliaments, and so on. In lighter blue, you will see that, especially in the Mediterranean, we have countries, including my own country, that are in the process of adoption, and this takes a long time. Why does it take a long time? Because the stakeholders cannot agree. Let me give you an example from my own country, where we have now a very strong wave of development for offshore wind, and then you have either the tourism economy or the fishing economy that says, wait a minute, this is the place where we go fishing. How can you put all these big wind turbines and then we will not be able to go fishing, and we will not accept that? And then you have people standing out, with pickets and everything. So you need to find a way to manage all these conflicting interests. The second reason, especially in the Mediterranean, is that we have geopolitical friction. And when you have geopolitical friction, it's very difficult to draw a border. So that's very, very important, and again, it takes a lot of diplomacy, a lot of discussion. But there is a third point, which I consider, and this will be my closing point for this event. There is a third point for maritime spatial planning, that the solution to most of the things I said are the processes or the reasons for not allowing it to move forward, is that if you want to solve it, you need to be based on science. You need to be based on knowledge. And this is why events like the one that you're organizing here are so important, because I remember once speaking with a former director of the IOC, Vladimir Ryabinin, and I asked him, what do you think is the biggest risk for the oceans? And he said the biggest risk is misinformation and fake news. If we don't base everything we decide to do for the ocean on knowledge, then we'll probably mess it up. And with this, I want to thank you very much for your attention and for this invitation, and I'll be happy to participate in the discussion. Thank you.
you all for this. Can everybody hear me? Yes, good. I think we had three very different points of view, from a more global IOC perspective, from a more island perspective, and you from this climate change into marine spatial planning and governance link. I think you provided here a good space for questions. And actually, I had prepared some questions, and you know them by heart because I've sent them before to you. But I actually am going to change.
It's all set up, you know.
I'm going to change the questions because I think you've given me some more really interesting perspectives here. And the first one goes to Louise. Are you with us online? Can we have Louise online? Yes, good.
Yes, I am,
Yeah.
right?
My first question, Louise, goes to you. And, you know, in the work that you are doing now with the IOC Decade of the Ocean, and given this that we've seen yesterday and today on you know, the climate change and the impact it has in different countries, and the IOC, as you mentioned, involves, if I'm not mistaken, 150 countries. How do you see this future ocean governance, considering that the impact of the ocean health and the climate change is quite different between these countries? So some countries are producing more impact, but they are not necessarily the ones suffering this impact. So how do you see IOC Ocean Decade playing a role there?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. So I'll try to answer it. Well, first of all, at the IOC, we are 150 countries, but we propose that the decade would be a UN initiative, and therefore we are 192 countries. And so this is where I think global governance is fundamental, because if you want to tackle such a problem like the ones that we've created in the ocean, like eutrophication, acidification, and so on, we need to get all these countries together. We need to show clearly what is happening, what is the contribution from each of them, and how together we can go to solutions. And this is where, for instance, we are now getting this commitment concerning marine litter, particularly the plastics, with the Nairobi Agreement. So I believe that to have, to be able to get global solutions, we need to get all these countries together. And this is one of the roles of the decade. And we are being able to bring these people together. It's not always easy. As you mentioned, there are different issues in different countries. Some countries cause more problems than others. Some countries have more difficulties than others. And one of the other things that we are doing is investing a lot on ocean literacy and in capacity development. This is also fundamental because some countries, they don't have possibilities to act. They don't have the information. They don't have the access to the information. And they don't have also the literacy that is absolutely needed to engage the public sector, the governance, the decision makers in trying to do the best solutions based on the best science. And again, we are doing a great effort in trying to make scientists like myself and you and everyone here present to learn how to explain and how to convey the key messages to politicians and decision makers. So we have to have a clear language. We have to be based on clear scientific facts, good observations, and I think that's the way to go. So we are hoping that with the decade, at least, it is the chance that we have that until 2030, we together can revert the state of degradation of the ocean for which we are responsible, and leave a clean and healthy ocean for the generations to come.
Yeah, thank you, Luis, for that. I think it also might link a bit with the major effort that the UN is making with the World Ocean Assessment, now on the third report, and this is a commitment from a lot of countries contributing to produce that data, and that's also something important. You know, I'm a bit provocative here, and I always feel that these commitments that we take at this level, like the ones that were taken last year on the Ocean Conference, sometimes people might think that, you know, these are just commitments on paper, but in fact, it takes a lot of compromise and political diplomacy to get to those commitments, and that's how you start moving the agendas at the political level. So thank you very much for that. Now I have a question for Mafalda and Spyros, and it links with both of your presentations. You mentioned the case of selvagens, marine protected areas, and you also, Spyros, mentioned that the data that you have done with Fundação Oceano Azul reports on that the highest value of that marine protected area that you could calculate was the CO2 carbon sinking. And the problem today, and I think we heard this yesterday on one of the sessions, is that this is not yet turned into a monetary concrete value that people can transact within the ocean. Because this might link with what Luis just said. If we can turn this carbon sinking or carbon trading bonds, the blue carbon bonds, into reality, then we have a tool here that can help us to govern better the ocean, like the most polluting countries paying higher carbon sinking bonds to compensate for their pollution. So how do you see this in a space, Spyros, in the Mediterranean, where you showed us clearly that you don't have yet adopted the European directive on this, plus maintaining selvagens, marine area, protected area, Mafalda, when you have all of this controversy, you know, the fishermen, the tourism. How do you see all of this linking?
Should I go? So to answer the first part of your question, Elena, and thank you very much for it, I think that my first reaction is that, yes, we are late. I mean, the blue carbon issue needs to be resolved as quickly as possible, and the market needs to be supported both at political and business level, because it will create much more benefit than cost than what it does. So the fact that we're late in that is not good. The fact that we're late with all the tools that we can develop for addressing climate change is not good either. But my estimation is that we have a very short time in front of us, I would say anywhere between 5 to 10 years, when we will have established high enough prices to sustain a market like this. And this is very important because when you take, for example, the Selvagen Islands, this is like a resource that you have there that once it comes into life is very important. That gives you reason enough within the 5 to 10 years that I'm predicting we'll have a market like this to say, let's protect this resource, because at the same time we have all the other benefits that we get from a system like this. So instead of squandering it, if you like, you have to make sure that you do protect them, as very well the region is doing through maritime spatial planning and all the other actions, so that when the market comes to fruition, you have a very, very important possibility. Think of the possibility of, for example, raising a green or a blue bond for the Selvagen Islands, right? That could be a very, very important source of income. And yeah, I'll stop here with this and we'll come back to it.
How do you manage this conflicting, views and wishes under this protected area in Madeira?
Selvagens, it's the first protected area in Portugal since 71. So it's been like a flag to Madeira, the protection of the maritime areas. And we have 89% of our territorial sea protected. So since 71 that we try to protect both the land and the sea. And I think it's an honor for us all, not only for Madeira, but also for Portugal, to have the biggest protected area in the North Atlantic. And it's a no-take area, so it's forbidding all. But I think it's also important, what we were talking about, to create value. So for the fishermen to understand what it means, we have to say that protection has a value of something. So the blue bonds will be a good way, but like Spyros say, we need to make it happen quickly. And also the means that we need to access the importance of the area and what can we achieve. But also we manage well because we are trying to develop the scientific tourism for the islands, because to protect, we need to know. So it's one thing that the government wants. It's for more people who are especially scientific researchers, to be able to go to selvagens and to see by themselves.
Yeah, this idea that, in fact, what you are trying to say, Mafalda, is that, if I understood correctly, is that we actually need more data and more science to back up this idea that we need to know exactly how much carbon does that particular space and area, for example, sinks, and how much does that species capture, how long does it keep it there, because it's not enough just to say that it captures carbon. If it then releases it again, then it's not the same thing. So again, that's the role of science here in helping governance, is providing this data. So before I continue, I want to ask to the audience if you have a burning question now, or if I can continue. The first one is always the hardest. Yes, Joanna? Just a minute, we have...
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for your interventions. This has been really inspiring. I was wondering, what do you see as greatest opportunities and potentially any challenges that arise with the recently agreed ICES treaty in terms of ocean governance? As we know, the high seas actually covers a very vast proportion of our ocean. So I was wondering what your views are on the greatest opportunities in first place, but if you also foresee any challenges in terms of ocean governance. Thank you.
Who wants to go? What's your view on the recent ICES treaty on ocean governance? Luís, you want to go?
Yes, I can go. Well, these treaties are absolutely fundamental because, as you know, these areas are areas in which there is no jurisdiction from the countries, and therefore they are considered what we consider a common good for the humanity, so a common heritage of the humanity, and we need really to be all together realizing what is going to happen in these areas. And particularly, these are areas where, for instance, there are already plans to start doing deep sea mining. And so in such areas, it's absolutely fundamental that we have regulations, that we are able to protect the biodiversity in this area, to have clear procedures for impact assessments in this area, and not to start anything before we have clear regulations, clear monitoring procedures, which may allow, for instance, if something is going wrong, to take action and to stop something that is causing a huge problem. So, whereas when you are in areas under national jurisdiction, the state can decide to do whatever he wants. So, for instance, if in Portugal we have mineral deposits and we decide not to exploit them, no one can do that. But when we go to the area, what we call the area, which is everything that is outside the areas of national jurisdiction, then there was no clear mechanism for protection biodiversity there. And therefore I think it's a major step. So yeah. I hope together we can be able to make sure that we don't repeat in the ocean what we have done wrong on the surface of the earth in the immersed part.
Yeah, just before I pass the question to Spyros, who also wants to answer, for all of those here in the room that might not be fully aware, there's a major difference between the land and the ocean, which is land is private property and ocean is the public common good. And therefore, ocean governance is even more important in this context because it's for everyone, not from a single owner. Let's put it this way. Spyros, do you want to add something?
My response to your very interesting question, and thank you for that, and thank you for your presentation yesterday about it. I was really, really interested to follow that. But if I said it in a very Americanized way, I would say that the High Seas Treaty is like marine governance on steroids. It's really this thing, because you have to make sure that you try to manage a resource that is considered totally common, as you just said. Second, we lack a lot of knowledge. There is a lot of pressing now need for collecting scientific knowledge. Before the treaty, it was not pressing. Now it is, because we need to know exactly what we're managing. Otherwise, some of the quickest movers will get the best, let's say, piece, and that would be a problem, because then it's very difficult to revisit it. Second point is that besides the knowledge, we need a lot of awareness. I mean, the fact that we now need to explain what the High Seas Treaty just a few months after it was agreed is natural. If we have to keep on explaining it 3 years from now, we'll have failed. People need to understand why it exists, what it means, and how it will be managed. Third, in terms of actually developing the governance web around it, which means legal agreements, which means intergovernmental agreements, and so on, we have to move very fast. And we have seen that, for example, when it comes to the UN is not the quickest or most responsive. We've seen it with the UNFCCC, right, with the Convention on Climate Change. It has taken 30 years to come to something that was binding, the Paris Agreement. So we need to be prepared to move fast, use the knowledge of the past and avoid the mistakes of the past, and then be very focused also on the sectors. Because if you think about all the sectors that are involved in the High Seas Treaty, intercontinental shipping, offshore fisheries or mining and so on. These are very big interests, and we need to regulate them and start a discussion with them already. It will not happen by itself. So that's why I'm saying it is a very, very big, high bill, let's say, for ocean governance, but it's also a tremendous opportunity. If we cut it right now, then we will probably, just as Luis said, avoid mistakes that we have done in the past. The only analogy I can see is the type of legislation that is now being discussed, if you like, about space. It's the same thing. It's as unknown and as important and as huge as space, so we need to do it correctly now.
Yeah, the point is that we know more about space than we know about the ocean. So in that point, we are actually ahead of time. Yeah, I can see one question there. I don't know where the mic is. Is that coming? We still have some time. I'm controlling.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure if I'm allowed, Elena. Don't actually have a question, but I want to draw your attention to a program of the decade, one of the 31 global programs that has been endorsed by the decade, that actually tackles this subject of the High Seas Treaty and the lack of knowledge especially on the deep sea, and that program sits here in University of Aveiro. It's called Challenger 150, and our name is a decade to study deep sea life, and I invite everyone to look at the poster that is outside.
Okay,
thank you,
Anna. Yeah, that's a good point. Here, the university has been deeply involved in deep sea knowledge as well. I don't know if there are any more questions in the audience. I'm going to do one last question before I pass the word. No? Okay. So I just want, as a final question, to a quick answer from the three of you is, how do you see in the near future the usage of the ocean common space? So I'm talking about, high seas beyond the exclusive zones, giving this anticipated strong competing use of space, but actually all of these activities are needed. How do you see these ocean activities like marine renewable energies, large projects happening here, also in Portugal, the need for food production and for restoration of endangered ecosystems, transportation routes that are so crucial for intercontinental linking? Do we have all the tools to govern this today, and what will be the winning scheme? Who wants to start?
I can start because local to global.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think, first of all, like Spara said, the Maritime Special Plan Directive will be very important. So I think first the member states have to have the plan approved and then to work together because we need cooperation between scientists, politicians, and even the people, because it's difficult when we do the Maritime Special Plan to interact all these sectors. But it's, for me, I think it's easier first to do in our area and then to collaborate with the other countries. That's what we are doing now. We are working with Spain, France, and for instance, we work with the other outermost regions in this area, because it's very important first to the local people to understand what it's important and what they want for the area, and then to raise to a global plan.
Good perspective. Spiros?
Let me take you 150 years back, just that. So,
look at the future.
150 years back, the world was going through what we consider now the Industrial Revolution. And people were trying to figure out what this would lead to. Everyone was fearing that because of the Industrial Revolution, they would be losing jobs and so on. But in fact, they were unable to actually predict what the effects of all this would be. One of the most important effects being climate change. Nobody had thought of that because they were just driving in the dark. They had a thing that was happening, a huge revolution happening, and driving in the dark, so they could not foresee. We are not allowed to not foresee this now because we have two revolutions happening. We have the AI revolution, and we have the development of the blue economy, which is also a revolution because it will change the way that the economy works globally. So to avoid the same mistake that we did 150 years back, we need, I think, to synthesize those two things. First, have a lot of knowledge, as we said before, study, research, put together information and knowledge from many different aspects and sides of science, and use artificial intelligence and the computing power that we have and will have as years go by. For example, as we do in the ocean mission, the digital twin of the ocean. We need to be able to run models to show us what the planning and the effects of decisions will be. Otherwise, there is no way to manage it. It's too big a challenge. So, but now we have more knowledge, more technologies. We need to move on in these two directions and be able to do it.
Yeah. Luis, do you want to add something?
Yes, well, for this, I think it's absolutely critical that we have a dialogue, an open dialogue between all major stakeholders. Because, and of course, I would also agree very much with Spiros and also with Mafalda that the thing that we've always been doing until now is first we act and then we react to the problems that we cause. Now it's the time to think first and act later. So to be able to act and not to do the wrong things that we've done until now, we need science, we need knowledge, we need sustainable observations. And we need the dialogue. For instance, we need all together to realize what is the problem of overfishing and how can we make fishing sustainable. We need to look at the problem. For instance, we want offshore energies, but sometimes the areas where you have offshore energies, you are competing with areas which are fishing areas. So you have to bring these stakeholders together. So we have to realize what is the importance between the different sectors, and that's the difficulty in ocean managing, in maritime zone planning and so on, which is how to make all these different and competing interests together so that we are able to get some sustainable solutions. And this is not easy. It's like, for instance, we cannot go for green energy and not to exploit lithium and other things. So many times it's just a question of ignorance, many times in which we want something, but we don't want what comes with it. So we need to know what are the impacts of what we want, and we need to get sustainable solutions for that. And so this requires really knowledge dissemination, and a dialogue so that we come to a common agreement on the best solutions.
Okay, thank you very much for this. I think the word that comes out to my mind immediately of this session is data, and the second word is compromise, engaging everyone, and that's all that governance is all about. So to close this fantastic panel, I have the tremendous honor, and it is indeed an honor, of calling Professor Alexandre Quintanilha to the stage. He is a distinguished and international acclaimed scientist and researcher in physics and biomedical sciences, having spent a large proportion of his career at the USA in California, Berkeley University. For all Portuguese, we know him as being the director of EBMC in Porto for many, many years, and is a cherished member of several international scientific academias. He's a Jubilee Full Professor today, and he acts as the President of the Parliament Commission for Education and Science. It's an honor to receive you here in Aveiro, and we will leave the stage now to leave it all to you as you deserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Helena, for this very kind introduction. And there are a few things I wanted to say, but before I do that, let me emphasize what I think has been the main message that we've received here today. And in the issues that regard the ocean science, the way the ocean influences our lives and the way we interact with the ocean, there are so many dimensions. There is biology, there's chemistry, there's physics, there's economy, there's jurisprudence. There's a lot of areas that intermingle with each other. So we need knowledge. I think this has been emphasized over and over again, and I think that's what, in a sense, Portugal has been trying to do over the last decades, which is to emphasize the importance of developing knowledge. But knowledge takes time. Knowledge takes a lot of time. And when you think that you need dialogue between different areas of knowledge, that is even more difficult, because each area of knowledge has their own vocabulary. They have their own way of expressing some of the challenges that they want to interpret, and dialogue between different areas of knowledge is not easy, and many educational systems are not taking that sufficiently seriously to encourage the dialogue and the transdisciplinarity that is needed to deal with the challenges that we are facing today. So knowledge takes time, dialogue takes even more time, and the bottom line is that politics and politicians usually don't have that luxury. They don't have the luxury of time because the problems are so huge and so immediate that they have to make decisions without having all the knowledge that they would like to have to be able to have robust policies and robust decisions. This is a challenge, a huge challenge for every domain in society, for educational systems, for dialogue between citizens, for participation of citizens into some of these problems. But I want to come back to this at the end. Let me start by saying that I'm very pleased to be here at the Ciência 2023, which has become a tradition over the years, and that it's moved out of Lisbon to Aveiro, which some consider our Venice of Portugal. So it's very appropriate that the ocean subject was taken up in Aveiro for the Science 2023. So I want to congratulate the Ministry, the Foundation for Science and Technology, the Ciência Viva organization, and the University of Aveiro for having done this, for having you all here today. Congratulations for having made that decision. When I think about the ocean, I feel a little bit like a fossil. I was, as I mentioned, I was in Berkeley in the decades of 70s and the 80s of last century. And that's the time when I invited people like Roger Revelle and Charles Keeling and Bert Bolin and Brucker to come and give lectures in Berkeley. These are all classical names that anybody who ever studied anything to do with the ocean knows and reveres, I would hope. And so, to me, coming back to this theme is exciting. It's a little bit of déjà vu that I'm experiencing, but it's very rewarding. Now, it was also transmitted by all the speakers that the ocean science is a global challenge. I hope, this is the question I have, that having the United States join UNESCO again is probably for the good of everybody. We had the man with the orange hair in the White House for a few years, and he did more damage to that country than probably any other issue that has occurred. So I'm very glad that this has happened, and I hope this also helps the UNESCO in the work that they are doing. There are many challenges in this area. I like to think of the issue of climate change as a huge issue, and it's a little frustrating because we've already had almost 30 Conference of Parties, COPs, as they are known. And after 30 years of having countries join together, CO2 is increasing at 3 times the rate that it was increasing 30 years ago. So all this talk, all this dialogue, all this stuff going on, and CO2 is still going up and increasing very rapidly. It shows what the difficulty is of this dialogue. We achieved something in Paris. It's great, but it's very, very modest in terms of what we need to do in the future. I think it's also important to transmit some success stories in the area of the environment. I was the assistant director at the Lawrence Berkeley Lab of a division on energy and environment, and I still remember many of the issues that were discussed then that have disappeared from our vision. Nobody talks about acid rain anymore. It hasn't disappeared, but it's no longer an issue. It's being partly solved. The issue of the ozone hole is also still there a little bit, but nobody talks so much about the ozone hole. The smog in London, which is long before my time, there's no longer smog in London. We know how to avoid. Now the smog is in Beijing and in other places of the world, so we know how to handle some of these. Lead in paint and lead in gasoline, it's solved, it's been done with. So we should be optimistic about the fact that some of these huge global challenges have actually been dealt with, and we hope that through knowledge we'll be able to deal with the new ones. Portugal, in a sense, has been a very interesting experience, and I'm talking now not only as a scientist, but also as a member of parliament, which is part of the reason I was invited to be here. Portugal is, at the moment, one of the leading countries in renewable energies. Many Portuguese don't realize that there are some months in which all the energy they consume at home is renewable. This is extraordinary, and it's an enormous success story that we have to tell. And very recently, there was a Eurobarometer that came out that showed that the Portuguese were probably #1 in all of Europe and a few other countries in believing that it is through knowledge that you actually deal with the challenges that we have. This is extraordinary. A country that had 300 years of inquisition, had 100 years of instability, political and economic, had 50 years of dictatorship, in a few decades can achieve this. I think it's amazing. And I think we should be very proud of that, in a sense. So what is the role, one of the roles, and what can be the roles of parliaments? And I want to end with that. I think parliaments, we just had a meeting in Lisbon where I was able to bring 15 or 16 European parliaments to discuss how to use artificial intelligence the best possible way for the functioning of parliaments and for the future of the policies that are being discussed. And I think it's bringing people together, it's dialogue again, it's trying to find out the success stories in various different countries in Europe. How do we not repeat mistakes? How do we learn from those that have been able to achieve and get success stories out of their work? We passed a climate law 2 years ago, and I was also proud to be the spokesperson for it. All the parliamentary groups asked that I should be the spokesperson. I don't know much about climate, but we were able to put out a very ambitious climate law in our parliament that was approved by 90-some% of the members of parliament, which is something. When you think that some would like us to be more ambitious, others think we are being too ambitious. That's always the case. We were able to pass that law. We have a very interesting exercise that has been going on now for almost 20 years, which is what is called the Parliament of the Youth, where 1,000 schools get together and they develop a whole process around each different themes each year to come and present proposals for changes in Portuguese law. It's an incredible way of getting young people involved in policy discussion, understanding the role that they have in influencing policy in that area. And we have also science coffees, cafés de ciência, which we organize every year to bring to the attention of parliamentarians issues that we believe are important. These are all done in a very regular way. This has been going on for decades at the moment. And I think parliaments have an obligation to also reach out to society in order to involve them in the work that is done. But let me end by what I started with, because I think that's a very important message. You heard it here from several of the people that spoke. In order to have policies that are robust, in order to have policies that make sense, you need knowledge. Knowledge takes time, takes a lot of time. We are sometimes pressured because we think we do not have that time. We have to make time, and we have to invest in that which is going to bring knowledge to us. And that knowledge then needs to be discussed, needs different areas of knowledge need to get together to present their points of view and to try to dialogue. It's not easy. We know that from our own relationships in life. Imagine doing that between people in the social sciences and the humanities and the natural science. It's not easy, but it's imperative that that should occur. And this is a huge challenge for educational systems. So my final word is, let's believe that our trust in science and our trust in knowledge, not just scientific in the sense of the natural science, but also of the humanities and also of the social science. Let's hope that that can be fostered, can be developed even further, and let's hope that politicians, at least if they sometimes don't have the time to wait for all the knowledge, they are conscious of the fact that sometimes the decisions need to be changed because new knowledge comes up. So thank you very much for inviting me to be here with you, and I wish you all the great success in this meeting. Thank you very much.
Fantastic.